Synopsis. The boys race to the pool, but it's Adult Swim. Oh, my bad. Wrong channel. The boys write over what Mr. Bitters has on his whiteboard, and apparently that's good enough for everyone else. Camille compliments them on not letting Hollywood change who they are, but then James walks in looking more orange than our former president. They all break away where Camille reveals that James has Hollywood fever. Kendall reminds us that they made a pact at the beginning of the season, saying they wouldn't let Hollywood change them. Camille says they need to get through to James before it's permanent, like what happened to Guitar Dude, the Jennifers, and herself. The boys confront James, but he retaliates, and they give chase. Katie sets up a snow cone stand to beat the heat, and while Mr. Bitters tries to talk down to her, it's really her that has the last laugh. All the guys are recording at the studio, but even Gustavo is concerned. The guys update him and Kelly about this Hollywood fever thing, and Gustavo attacks a canonical minor. James flees, and Gustavo threatens the other guys that he'll fire him if they don't fix this. That's not very Gustavo of you, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say, you're just trying to scare tactic them. For now. The guys learn the spray tan comes off with water, and they suit up, and split off. Carlos goes to Frankie, and we learn that apparently, every time the Jennifers walk by, someone has to turn on a fan for them. Weird fourth wall break, but okay. The Jennifers fall off balance, without their third piece, and they confide in Carlos, who shouldn't be this happy. Carlos joins the Jennifers. Katie isn't allowed to have her stand anymore, unless she pays Mr. Bitters. Katie doesn't accept, and gets her stand taken away. So Buddha Bob shows up and gives Katie some interesting info he learned at business school. They make a plan, and we transition over to Kendall, who finally has James. Apparently James is the one, and he enters the elevator. But Kendall can't chase him down as he's about to get his ass kicked. Logan talks with Guitar Dude at the park, and we get to see a side of him we've never seen before, as he converts Logan to the carefree life of a hippie. Meanwhile, the Jennifers try to convince Carlos to be more aggressive, and Kendall runs by trying to get James, and eventually gets him cornered, but he's out of water. The severity of the situation sinks in, as Kendall and Gustavo discuss the problem. Carlos barges in and demands, oh no, he's become Wayne. Gustavo freaks out, but Stoner Logan tries to calm everyone down. James axe bombs the studio, and Kendall, Gustavo, and Kelly have to escape, as they're the only sane people left. Gustavo reveals this has happened to all his other bands, specifically listing Boy Quake as an example. Knowing they can't let this happen to Big Time Rush, they all split up to try and get each of the guys. Back at the pool, Katie and Buddha Bob are making snow cones. Mr. Bitters tries to shut them down, but there's a loophole in the contract, so they're off the hook. Kendall tries to get through to Logan, with his love of math, but I'm 90% sure he's high right now, and when you're high as a kite, you don't want to think about anything, let alone numbers. Gustavo's gotten a therapist for James, but James corrupts her before being beaten to death by Gustavo. The only one that makes any kind of real headway is Kelly, with Carlos, but the Jennifers are able to hold him back. They all check in together to see how much progress has been made, and while Gustavo is willing to drop the rest of them, Kendall stays true to what we know about him. And to make sure he can get an idea, he decides to head to the hockey rink to clear his head. This gives Kelly a plan, though. As they come to the conclusion, Kendall must have never got Hollywood fever because he never lost track of his roots. And maybe Hollywood fever is just a fancy word for homesickness. Kendall convinces Katie to sell the stand to Mr. Bitters, just in time for the health inspector to show up and shut it down. And together, Kendall, Katie, Buddha Bob, Kelly, and Gustavo are able to make a winter wonderland in Palm Woods Park. And everyone's back to their old selves as if nothing happened. Thoughts. Where do I begin? First of all, it wasn't boring. It never once felt like it was a chore to get through. But this episode did have some things that irritated me. First of all, I don't like how Gustavo was written in this episode. It has the same exact problem as Big Time Mansion, and wouldn't you know it, it's the same writer. Oh no. He's just too eager to replace them, especially when we know he cares about them. I guess a small explanation is given in the fact that this same thing has happened to all his other bands, so he thinks there's no coming back from it. But that just isn't conveyed well. Maybe if this episode came out before Big Time Terror, when he actually started to see them as friends, I'd be a bit more lenient on it. But at this point, it just doesn't make any sense. Although for the overall plot of the episode, it does make sense to have this happen at the end of the season. We saw them make their pact at the beginning in episode 1, and to have it happen earlier just wouldn't feel right. Now that they have an entire season of experience under their belts, it's more likely that now they'd be feeling homesick, especially since they haven't been home in what did they say, 6 months last episode? And plus, seeing a callback to something that happened 17 episodes earlier, it's a really nice touch. Overall, I wasn't too impressed with this episode, but I was at least somewhat engaged. So I guess that qualifies it for a vinyl record. Trivia. I don't know if I fully understand why this is listed as a trivia fact, as I couldn't really find any connection between the film and the show. But when Buddha Bob puts ice in the wood chipper, the scene is similar to something that happens in the movie Merry Christmas, Drake and Josh. But unlike here, it's not as successful in that film, as it ends up leading to shrapnel hitting every other house in the neighborhood. While I did have to do some digging to find this trivia myself, I should credit my sources. I got most of this information from the Big Time Rush fan wiki, specifically the blog Big Time Fever. If you want to fact check me, feel free to do so in the comments below, and if it's a big enough slip up on my part, I'll try and have your comment penned, assuming I haven't already done that to someone else. Alright, there we go. That's just one more episode before the finale now. I should probably go work on that video.
When the window blew out, I fell, cut myself. As the blood spilled, I was helpless, nearly killed. Your actions, they did curse me, and yet your lies still hurt me. One heart for all beings.